New discoveries are revealing ancient civilizations that predate that 5,000 years.
Both of these cultures had the same advanced machining with these stones.
We may not even be able to do today with the tools that we have available.
Is this proof of an advanced ancient civilization on a global scale?
It was the gods' technology, and so that's why we can't do it again.
On a recent episode I did with Billy Carson, you may have all recalled him talking about a trip he made into the Grand Canyon by helicopter, and when he landed, he was told that there were areas he could not go into because they were occupied by NASA. The reason for that being that there was some sort of establishment there by the ancient Egyptians. Now, we've heard all sorts of things over the years about the Grand Canyon, that there was a cover-up there that had to do with giants, and the Smithsonian was involved. But to get answers about this, I talked to my friend Timothy Hogan, who's the Grand Master of the Knights Templars, and in 1997 he had visited there on a hiking trip because of a map that he had attained that showed where there was an Egyptian temple. So we're going to talk to him all about that today. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you about another type of Egyptian connection with these incredible pyramids. These are these organ pyramids made by our very dear friend of the show, Michelle Hood. Now, these are organ ones. They have all kinds of different crystals in them. You can put them in the garden, put them around the home. You can even take them with you to the Grand Canyon if you so desired. They're fantastic. I recommend you go to Light to Light Pyramids and go and pick out your favorite organ pyramids. Now, I also want to tell you about these amazing functional mushrooms. And I know you all hear me talking about them every show, and I can't stop talking about them because they're all I take. And I know Timothy takes them too. They're absolutely amazing. I found them to be life-changing. I use them for different things. You know, I use the reishi at nighttime. That relaxes me. I use the chaga and the lion's mane, not only to boost my health up, but also for mental focus and memory, but as well as the cordyceps give you a lot of energy. And if you're interested, go to neurobuddha.com. And when you're checking out, in the coupon code area, put Enoch20 to save 20%, because why not? It certainly beats paying full price. So, Timothy, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. I really am excited to ask you about this amazing trip that you took into the Grand Canyon and what you discovered. I want to ask you, how did you first hear about this Egyptian area in the Grand Canyon?
At the time, I'd been very active in a Rosicrucian lodge at the time, and I had been talking with some of the leadership in the Rosicrucian lodge that I belonged to, and they were aware of this and had first told me about it. And I started looking into it, and of course I found the old newspaper article about it, which, you know, for some people have tried to dismiss because it was written on April 1st, and so, you know, they said, oh, it was April Fool's Day. You know, I mean, it was just a big prank. But actually, you know, there are several areas of the Grand Canyon that are named after Egyptian gods and goddesses, and other things Egyptian related. And so what we did is that then I had another mentor of mine who had a map that had these different sites listed out, and he had triangulated certain sites, and we narrowed down where we thought the most likely spot was for this particular location. And I should say that, you know, there are, at least when I went there were a number of different cave systems around the Grand Canyon. So I don't want to say what I found was definitively it, but I did find one particular site I found several caves that were cemented up, which was kind of unusual. But I found one particular site that had a pictograph carving of the god Anubis on the outside of it. and of course, this is, Anubis is an Egyptian god, and it was a big cave. I mean, it was a big cave system, and you could only get in at about maybe 20 feet, and then it was cemented up, so you couldn't go any further. And then I got arrested at that point. So
Can you tell us about when you were arrested? What were these guys like when they approached you? Did they have any official badges or ID? How did they identify themselves?
Yeah, I mean, they had identified themselves as working for the Grand Canyon Park System. I mean, they looked like park rangers, but they had badges. But the thing that was unusual, well, there are a couple of things that were unusual. The first one was, we had actually purchased a camping pass for the Grand Canyon, which you would have assumed meant that you could camp out in the Grand Canyon, right? 'Cause that's what we purchased. So but he told us, he said, "Oh, well, that pass is no good for this area where you're at." And we said, "Well, I mean, it didn't specify that we needed to be someplace in particular." And he said, "No, you have to leave. You basically have two options." And this is where he pulled out his gun. And I remember one of the guys I was with got my friend Dave got very upset about this, but when he pulled out his gun, but he basically said, "You have two options. You can either hike out of here right now, or you can go to one of our designated campsites and pay an extra amount of money to camp there for the night, and then hike out in the morning." And he gave us a ticket. And so we ended up hiking out, we ended up going to a designated camping site, camping there for the night, because there was no way we could get back out of there that night. We were just too exhausted, and there were signs the entire way down saying, "Don't try to hike in and out in one day because it's too much." But of course, this is what this park ranger was trying to order us to do. And then the really weird part was when I went to look into the ticket after I got home, it turned out that the ticket had been issued from a bogus courthouse. It wasn't even a real courthouse. It was like
Wow.
It was like some sort of a weird thing that had been set up by an independent agency to monitor this region. And so this actually led to me meeting, well, we ended up fighting it. Obviously, it ended up getting dropped. I didn't have to, I didn't get any charges against me for it because it wasn't even a real courthouse. But at the time, Congressman Schaefer of Colorado, he was in the 6th district of the House of Representatives. He had been involved in the National Parks Committee, and so he wanted to know more about this. So I ended up having to meet with Congressman Schaefer at the time, and I think as a result of some of that, that's what led to more federal oversight over the park itself, which, you could argue if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But at least there's not bogus tickets being put out there now. But yeah, ultimately, I'm confident that what was there that we found is still there. There's obviously no way you can move it. The only thing you could do is try to find ways of covering it up. As far as the pictographs go, I hope they're still there. I have photos of what was there.
So we know that these national parks came about from a very famous camping trip that happened in 1903 with Theodore Teddy Roosevelt and John Muir. And they brought about this idea of protecting national parks. I think it was a coming to God moment in the life of Theodore Teddy Roosevelt, because he had all these terrible things happen to him in his life, a lot of loss due to typhoid fever from his wife and his mother. And I think that the idea that we'd protect national parks is a very good thing. But it makes me wonder, and I wanted to ask you about this. Do we have a lot of things that are like this story that we hear, with things that might be off limits that are being protected at these national parks? Because when I was talking to the late Clifford Mahooty, who was a Zuni and Hopi elder, he told me that there was these stories of these giants that were running around at the time, and the ancient Native Americans had trapped these giants inside of caves and kind of smoked them out. And I started thinking about that when you were telling the story as well. But is there a chance that there could be all kinds of treasures and strange artifacts that are hidden inside of these national parks?
Well, I can definitely concur that there are certain Templar vaults, and we'll be getting into this more soon in other shows, but there are certain Templar vaults of Templar treasures that had been brought over here and had been deposited in certain vault locations. And some of these vault locations are, in fact, where later national parks were created at those locations. And they continue to be there, preserved in these national parks. Some people have no clue what they're walking over. So, yeah.
That is quite incredible. And in the Grand Canyon, and of course nearby in Utah, we find all kinds of strange stories. In Utah, people have talked about things like the Blind Frog Ranch and Skinwalker Ranch, and strange multi-dimensional sort of encounters or portals and strange things. So there must have been some reason, if there was ancient civilizations going there, that they wanted to head into those parts. What do you think it was about the Grand Canyon that attracted the ancient Egyptians there?
Well, it's interesting. There's places of particularly Utah, but also Arizona, that tend to look they look like Egypt. I mean, it's the same landscape. I mean, it's, if you go to the Valley of the Kings in Egypt and what you're looking at, it looks identical to what you see in places near Moab, for example. And there are areas, particularly there's a place called Horseshoe Canyon in Utah, which isn't too far from the Grand Canyon, where there are, I've been there too, and there are life-size figurines that look like Sumerian gods with long beards. And of course, the natives, they don't grow beards, so you need to ask yourself, who were these people that put these that captured these? Did the local natives draw people that they were seeing, or were they travelers that came there?
I'm reminded of the story we find in the Lost Secrets of the Sacred Ark that Lawrence Gardner talks about, and this relates to alchemy, which is something I know that is an expertise that you have, and we'll be discussing a lot more in upcoming shows. But in the story that Lawrence Gardner talks about in relation to modern discoveries of alchemy, he brings up the David Hudson story in the Yuma Valley of Phoenix, Arizona, where he talks about this terrible soil that they have that can't grow anything. And it turns out that he's able to make this discovery when he adds this sulfuric acid to things, and it starts to make this extraction of the monoatomic gold, the white powder of gold. Yeah. But also that park that we were talking about earlier that has the Sequoia Redwoods, Yosemite National Park.
Oh, Yosemite, sure.
That had John Muir, and it also had Theodore Teddy Roosevelt go there, and they had their famous camping trip where he says, "Hey, I'm going to protect national parks." Even that park has all kinds of strange stories attached to it, whether it's cryptids and extraterrestrials and strange ideas. So there's no doubt these places have been very ancient, and they've been the home to all kinds of visitations, and even giants, in fact. But I have to ask you, speaking of national parks, what about in your own backyard in Colorado? Do you suppose there was any prehistoric connections up there?
Well, there is all kinds of things in Colorado. There are 30 sites that I've visited around Colorado that actually have Celtic Ogham writing on it, which is translatable. Sadly, one of the sites that I actually did a dig for at the museum, the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, right around the same time, actually, that I went to the Grand Canyon. There was
1997.
right, 1997. There was shortly thereafter, somebody had destroyed and defaced all of this Celtic, where this Celtic writing was, and I still have photos of the Ogham writing that was there, and in fact, I even published some of them in my book Revelation of the Holy Grail, under the pen name Chevalier Emrys. But all of that's since been destroyed. But there still are several sites around Colorado, and there are also sites along the Arkansas River going from Oklahoma up into Colorado that have not only Celtic writing, but also Phoenician writing, and there are carvings of Anubis. So here's another, so we see the same, you can almost trace, I think you can almost trace how they traveled. Like they probably came in along the eastern coast of the United States, went into the Gulf of Mexico, up into the Mississippi River. Back then, the Mississippi River connected to the Arkansas River, so they just went from the Mississippi onto the Arkansas, and then just followed the Arkansas River all the way up into Colorado. And then from there, they just went over the mountains into Arizona, into the Grand Canyon area.
That makes perfect sense. But are you sure the Phoenician writing isn't from when our mutual friend Kareem El Kousa visited you in America? They just kind of did a cheeky 1-2 on the walls. But no, it is rather amazing. I mean, I know another friend of yours, Graham Hancock, who I knew, who's a wonderful guy, and just lovely when I've talked to him before, and I really enjoyed his new documentary, The Ancient Apocalypse, on Netflix, and his books are brilliant. Fantastic. But you are not only friends with him, but you're mentioned, by the way, in his books and in Magicians of the Gods.
I am, yeah. So I helped Graham with get into Lebanon. So his whole chapter on Baalbek, that whole region of Baalbek, it's kind of near the Syrian border in Lebanon. It's all controlled by Hezbollah. So
you're quite a star over there, and in Turkey. I mean, I talk to people all over all the time. They're like, mashallah, and they love you over there. When you and I are traveling in Egypt, the Middle East, you're like a superstar over there. Yeah. And I wanted to say that Graham, though, he's got that America Before, where he's looked at this, and there's all kinds of new facts coming out, research coming out, that we're starting to see that there was a lot more going on in America long before anyone else thinks so. And it's incredible what the Templars have done there, as well as when the Founding Fathers came there. I know you and Scott Walter are busy revealing so much about that right now. I look forward to discussing that with you more. But do you have any final thoughts on the idea of what we find in the Grand Canyon? And do you think we're going to find more discoveries there, or do you think it's already been discovered and it's been suppressed and it won't see the light of day for some time?
Well, the earliest newspaper article about it, of course, says that, someone from the Smithsonian Institute, went and pulled all that stuff out of there. And of course, the Smithsonian Institute denies its existence now, but they've done that with a lot of things. So, and the Smithsonian Institute is one of their largest funders historically has been the Roman Church. So there's been a vested interest in keeping certain things suppressed. And it's kind of like, Planet of the Apes, where they have to hide the talking doll that was dug up, so it's kind of a similar situation. So I don't know if we're going to see anything else pulled out of there, or if they're going to unseal those caves at some point. There may be still stuff in there. That would be great. I would love that if that is the case. But from what I could see, and apparently from what Billy Carson was able to see, it's very difficult to get into those areas now without being stopped and turned away and refused the opportunity to investigate them. So,
well, I think you were very lucky to get in when you did, to see what you did, and to be able to come back with photographic evidence. I mean, not many people can do that. And I kind of figured there was a Rosicrucian connection there, because the folks that have known, even in Egypt, about the temple that was underneath the Sphinx, and that there's a whole other area under the Giza Plateau there, they had these old Rosicrucian maps about it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's all really fascinating. Timothy, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And of course, we're going to have the links to your books down below, your social media, where people can find you. And they can also join the upcoming Initiation into the Mysteries of Egypt tour of March 2023. It's at sabatours.com. An amazing lineup. You have the Grand Master of the Knights Templars, a man who has looked upon the Anubis at the Grand Canyon. He will be there with us to show you the Anubis in Egypt. You don't want to miss this. And for everyone at home, remember to like, subscribe, comment down below, share this video with your friends, and we will talk to you on the next episode.